Picture the render. A mirror-walled skyscraper, half a kilometer tall, taller than the Empire State Building, except it doesn't stop. It runs in a perfectly straight line across the desert for 170 kilometers, glinting in the sun like a wall dropped from space. Inside, 9 million people, no cars, no roads, no pollution, everything you need a 5-minute walk from your door. Saudi Arabia called it the Line, and it promised it would be the most livable city on Earth, by far. Now here's what's actually been built. About 2.5 kilometers of foundations in the sand. That's it. Out of 170 kilometers promised, roughly 1.5% exists, and in September 2025, construction was suspended. As of this year, the work is pushed back to at least after 2030, and the full vision has been quietly shelved. This is the story of the gap between that render and that hole in the desert, because the line wasn't one promise. It was a stack of enormous promises, piled on top of each other, about people, about scale, about money, about willpower, and we're going to watch each one break, one at a time. And by the end, you'll see that what collapsed here isn't really a building. It's an idea about how the future gets made. Let me walk you through the promises, in order. A quick, important note before we do. The line has not been cancelled. Officially, it's still alive, just scaled back, suspended, and deferred indefinitely. That distinction matters, because the real story isn't that someone killed it. It's that reality did. Slowly. Promise by promise. So let's take them one at a time. Promise number 1. 9 million people will live here. When Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman unveiled the line in 2021, the headline number was 9 million residents, a brand new city, conjured from empty desert, bigger than New York. That was the dream. Then reality started filing in. First, the near-term target for 2030 quietly dropped from 1.5 million people to 300,000. Then, this year, it dropped again. The latest plan for the whole zone by 2030 is now up to 100,000 people. Go back and sit with that. The promise was 9 million. The current target is around 100,000. That's roughly a 99% cut from the number that sold the entire project to the world. The city for millions became, on paper, a town. Promise 1. Broken. Promise number 2. 170 kilometers built on schedule. The whole magic of the line was its length, a continuous mirrored city stretching 170 kilometers across mountains and desert. The problem is that this turns out to be one of the most difficult things anyone has ever proposed to build. An engineering professor at Imperial College London called it, bluntly, a crackpot idea, and did the math. To finish the line on its original timeline, you'd have to build it at roughly 15,000 times the speed of normal construction. There isn't enough steel and concrete in the world to pour it that fast. The route runs through mountains and across seismic fault zones. Even the contractors couldn't agree on the basic dimensions. One of the main delivery firms measured the route at 140 kilometers, 30 short of the official number. The mirror city technique that looked dazzling on a short test stretch simply did not scale to 170 kilometers. By the last estimate, the amount due to be finished by 2030 had shrunk to about 2.5 kilometers. Promise 2. Broken. Promise number 3, it'll cost around $500 billion. This is the number in our title, and it was the original price tag for the whole NEOM project that the line sits inside. $500 billion. Already one of the most expensive things humans have ever attempted. But then an internal audit leaked. According to that audit, reported by the Wall Street Journal, the true cost to actually finish the line as designed wasn't $500 billion. It was somewhere around $8.8 trillion, with a T. That's nearly 9 times Saudi Arabia's entire annual economic output for a single city, with a completion date that slipped all the way out to the year 2080. And here's the brutal part. For all that, only about $50 billion has actually been spent so far. and there's almost nothing standing to show for it. Promise 3 didn't just break. It revealed that the real number may have been a fantasy from the start, which brings us to promise number 4, the one underneath all the others. Nothing will stop us. For years, that was the whole brand of these Saudi mega projects. Unlimited ambition, unlimited money, a leader who could approve anything with a signature. And then the money got real. Construction contracts across the project were slashed from $71 billion to $30 billion, a 60% cut. The sovereign wealth fund behind it wrote down $8 billion across its mega projects. The workforce on the line was cut by about 35%. Over 1,000 employees were packed up and moved from the remote desert site to the capital, Riyadh. Job postings for the whole project fell by nearly 75% in a single year. Individual contracts started getting torn up. A $1 billion tunneling deal, gone. Another $1 billion contract, terminated. The thing that was never supposed to stop was very visibly stopping. Promise 4. Broken. So why? Why did the country with one of the deepest pockets on the planet have to pull back? And this is where you have to be careful, because the easy answer is wrong. The easy answer is oil prices crashed. And it's true that for most of 2024 and 2025, oil was a problem. Brent crude sat in the $60 to $70 range. And Saudi Arabia needs oil somewhere around $90 a barrel just to balance its budget, and well over $100 to actually pay for all of the Crown Prince's projects at once. So for 2 straight years, the math underneath the dream was quietly broken. The kingdom's own oil company cut its dividend by around $40 billion, which drained money straight out of the fund building the line. Foreign investors didn't show up the way Saudi Arabia hoped, and the country had 2 hard deadline commitments bearing down on it: the World Expo in 2030 and the Football World Cup in 2034. Projects with fixed dates that have to be ready, which made an open-ended mirror city in the desert the easy thing to cut. But here's the twist most coverage gets wrong, so let's be precise. Oil is not cheap right now. As of today, because of the war with Iran and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, Brent crude has spiked back up to around $95 a barrel. So the simple story, oil got cheap and they ran out of money, isn't quite it. The damage was done during the cheap years, and then the war added a different kind of pressure. A ballooning deficit and deep uncertainty, with Saudi Arabia posting its biggest quarterly budget shortfall since 2018. And the war pushed the kingdom to spend on different things entirely: ports, defense, and data centers for artificial intelligence. The future Saudi Arabia is buying now isn't a mirror city for 9 million people. It's server farms and shipping terminals. The dream got swapped for the spreadsheet. Now, before we zoom out, the part that doesn't make the glossy renders at all: the human cost. To clear the land for this project, members of a local tribe, the Huaytat, were forced off land they'd lived on for generations. People who refused to leave were arrested, and at least one man was killed by Saudi security forces in 2020 for resisting the eviction. The towers were built by migrant laborers working in brutal desert conditions, and the project has drawn years of human rights and environmental criticism. The render showed a clean, glowing utopia. The ground underneath it tells a much harder story. So let's zoom out, because the line is going to be taught in business schools one day, and here's the lesson. This wasn't killed by one villain or one bad day. It was killed by the gap between a promise and a price tag, showing up at every single level at once. 9 million people became maybe 100,000. 170 kilometers became 2.5. $500 billion became a number with a T in it that no one could actually pay. And nothing will stop us became suspended until after 2030. Each promise was beautiful on its own. Stacked together, they were physically, financially, and humanly impossible. And no amount of money or willpower could change that. What's left now is telling. The Grand Mirror City is on ice, and the money is flowing instead to the boring, profitable stuff. The ports, the industrial zones, the data centers. The things that actually generate cash. The dream was the mirror city. The business was the warehouse all along. And that's the real takeaway for anyone who deals with money or plans or big shiny visions of the future. A vision is only ever as real as the cash flow and the engineering standing behind it. The most expensive word in finance is obviously. The line was obviously going to be the future, right up until somebody finally added up the bill. So here's the question worth sitting with. Saudi Arabia had $500 billion to start, the best engineers money could hire, and a leader who could approve absolutely anything he wanted. And it still couldn't outbuild the gap between a promise and a price tag. So the next time you see some breathtaking render of the future, the floating city, the mega tower, the impossible skyline, ask yourself the only question that actually matters. Are you looking at a vision? Or just a very expensive way of finding out what can't be done? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want to see another mega project that ran straight into the wall between ambition and arithmetic, watch this one next.